So despite some strong economic numbers, new polling finds most Americans believe the country is in a recession. It is not. In the latest Harris poll conducted for The Guardian, 56% of adults expressed the belief that we are in a recession. That includes 67% of Republicans, 49% of Democrats, and 53% of independents. And although inflation has fallen sharply over the past year, 72% of adults still think that is increasing. Joining us now, former Treasury official, Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Rattner, to help us separate perception from the facts of this economy. Steve, good morning. So we can start with that idea of the United States being in a recession right now, which it plainly is not. We can talk about why so many Americans believe that, but let's talk first in your chart about where we really are.
Yeah, Willie, it's really quite an, an extraordinary poll. We've seen polls before that show Americans having a more negative view on the economy. I've never seen one quite like this. These are the numbers you mentioned in your lead-in, that roughly more than half of Americans think we're in a recession. It is divided somewhat by party. More Republicans, 67%, feel it than Democrats, but even Democrats, 49% feel it. We've seen this kind of divergence before. Interestingly enough, it flips around with every election, not surprisingly. But here's the reality. The reality is the economy has basically been growing since COVID, except for a very small downturn here. Under Joe Biden, it's grown by 2.8% a year, which is actually slightly faster than it was growing under Trump, even before COVID hit. And so you can see every quarter we've had reasonably strong economic growth. So why people feel this is really quite a mystery.
So, Steve, what about, this other sort of low unemployment, a surging stock market, and yet ... How do you explain what's going on with the economy?
Yeah, you get the same kind of news results when you look at those kinds of things. 50% of Americans think unemployment is at a 50-year high. 50% think it's at a 50-year high. Unemployment is actually at a 50-year low. It's really amazing. Unemployment is below 4%. It's been below 4% for months and months now, and it is it's just extraordinary that people think we're at a 50-year high. You can see some of the highs over here. Another issue is stocks. Half of Americans think stocks are down this year. Stocks are actually up 11% this year. They're up 45% since Joe Biden took office. Complete disconnect in people's minds between perception and reality of the stock market.
Well, it's how, there are some people who are legitimately feeling the pinch still. And yet, though, overall, Americans have a very negative perception of Biden's economy. And is that fair? What do you see?
What's interesting, and we've looked at some of these numbers before, is that if you ask people how their own finances are, about 75% think they're okay. And that really goes all the way back to 2018, pretty consistently. What's happened in the last number of years, and not just under Biden, but it really started back in about 2019 or thereabouts, the perception of how local economies are doing has deteriorated, and the perception of how the national economy is doing has deteriorated. So people have created this dichotomy in their minds between the national economy, their local economy, and themselves. What's also interesting, most recently, and these are from some other polls that have come out lately. What's also interesting is the way divergence between sentiment and approval has occurred. People's sentiment about the economy has actually been trending up. We had one bad number the other day, but we'll have to see if it's an aberration. It jumps around a little bit. But the general trend has been improving sentiment. On the other hand, Biden's approval ratings have been trending down. Now, there are obviously a lot of other things going on, particularly the war in Gaza and so on and so forth. But there seems to be now a spread between how people feel about the economy to some degree and how they feel about Biden.
So let me bring Jen Palmieri into this, because what does the Biden campaign do with this? There is not just what Steve has laid out, but you have politicians, Nikki Haley, the Trump campaign, screaming from the rooftops pretty much anything about the Biden economy being, a complete failure, and not a lot of truth to what they're saying. And then also some right-leaning networks echoing what you could argue is disinformation, or at least loose facts. How does the Biden campaign pierce through this?
I mean, the first thing I would want to try to understand is is to look at the data to understand why this is happening. I mean, it's interesting, Steve said, sort of where things diverged from what reality is and how people feel about it. It was around 19, 20. I mean, I think that people are still in just such trauma from COVID, from what happened to jobs, what happened to prices, supply chain during that time. They're still just feeling very uncertain. And so, and prices are still high. Inflation's not growing, but we don't have deflation. So I think what you want to do, I think you really want to let people know there is a strong foundation under us. So it's not so much Biden taking credit. I did this, I did that. I made everything better. But believe in the strong foundation of the economy so that you know that this is real and it's something we're going to build on. And then let people know what you're doing to make things more affordable to them. That's like the cost of insulin going down. Note when prices are decreasing, and that we're seeing that with some major chains have decided to do that to show people both the big picture, it's better, but then also the small differences in their own life of ways they're trying to make things more affordable, whether that's through student loans, health care, or even just noting when prices are dropping. And I feel like then maybe it can kind of take hold for people to be a little more real.
All right.